Hello and welcome to Green Building Bites presented by Green Building Alliance. I'm Leslie Montgomery from the Green Building Alliance team, and in today's bite, I bring you an interview with Lance Harrell. Lance is the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Workforce Development at the Master Builders Association of Western Pennsylvania. He's also very active in his community, including serving on the Board of Directors of the Young Preservationists Association of Pittsburgh. Let's meet Lance now. Hi, Lance. How are you?
I'm doing good, Leslie. How about yourself today?
I'm good. Thank you for talking with me. Your role is focused on fostering diversity, equity, and inclusion within the Master Builders Association, as well as leading workforce development efforts. What are your hopes for what you'll accomplish in this role, and what are your measures of success?
So my role as the Director of Workforce Development, Diversity, and Inclusion with the Master Builders Association, the role is to increase minority participation within the trades. Usually when you say the trades, most people don't know that there's 16 different trades out there in Western Pennsylvania. So I know the general public is only familiar with maybe like the plumbers, electricians, and carpenters. But if you say a steam fitter, most people will say, well, what's a steam fitter, or even a sheet metal worker? So the goals of success is to really first expose and to really increase those numbers of women and minority participation within those 16 trades.
And I know, you and I have talked before about the fact that there is, it's sort of hard to measure your starting point because there's a lack of data. So can you talk a little bit about the importance of data, both for sort of starting the initiative and then gauging success?
I think data, regardless of what industry you're in, either you're in banking, healthcare, human services, the construction industry, the first thing the managers always wants to say is, well, what's the facts? Where's the data? So without having that data or lack of data, it's going to be really hard to scale up, but we at least need a starting point. It's almost like I'm taking a test without having a score. And I know that from being in this assignment for the last 10 months, if you go past most work sites, you probably would just see maybe a single-digit participation of women and minorities in those fields. So we're trying to kind of like maybe do like kind of an eyeball, but we definitely have to work better with our trades, with the unions, so they can really start collecting that data. They may have been maybe not really up to date on keeping that information, but we actually have to get them to get used to that and to be more responsible in collecting that, because it's going to be hard for us to scale up and kind of create the appropriate programs for minorities and women to actually reach those numbers.
Tell me, Lance, a little bit about what drew you to this job.
Ever since I was in my younger years, I've always did construction or remodeling, just kind of basic repairs around the house. So I've always had kind of a hands-on experience, understanding what it takes to do some basic, stuff in the construction industry. But for the last few years, I've been doing a lot of project management work, working with like D1 Mellon or PNC Bank. But then I've always been really engaged and involved in community as far as for like mentoring, either with Big Brothers, Big Sisters, sitting on the board with YPA, Young Preservation Association, or being a member of Operation Better Block. So when this opportunity came along, it was like, it's kind of the best of both worlds, where I can still do the community outreach, be involved in construction. And I've always looked at it like, it's like a fellowship. I'm getting paid to do something that I love to do. And that's the biggest thing when I eventually will talk about it in the trades, is that if you do something that you love, it's not like it's work. You actually enjoy it. And if you love to weld, if you love to do iron work or sheet metal work, you will see it in your work and you'll just excel in that field.
My next question is, what do you think is the biggest challenge, and what is the biggest opportunity facing diversity, equity, and inclusion in the construction industry right now?
The biggest challenge I would have to say is marketing. First is just getting the word out to the public. Historically, the unions always did the kind of word of mouth. And if 95 or 98% of your workforce is white males, that was going to typically be your same recruiting, for each and every year. So the biggest challenge is marketing, getting the word out. Two, I would say rebranding the industry. Historically, the unions have not always been, or the field has not always been open to all individuals. And a lot of times, if you go to someone who's younger now, they'll be willing, but their parents or a relative may say, well, you know what, back in my day, when I applied, I didn't have those same opportunities. So definitely have to do a lot of rebranding. Getting the word out. As I mentioned before, most people are only familiar of 3 trades, but there's 16 trades. So it's that whole marketing campaign, kind of rebranding, changing the whole imagery of the industry and making it open. So you have to make sure that this workforce, this environment is open to, like I said, minorities and women, just people of all. The biggest opportunity, and I think it's like I kind of call it like the Frankenstein, that when you do something the very first time, you have amazing results, right? Because it's never been done before. So you're kind of created from the ground up. Imagine by just simply doing a massive marketing campaign, you're going to get numbers that you've never seen before because it was never done before. So we'll definitely get like a big major response. Then when you get that response, is being prepared to deal with that large influx of applicants, and then also trying to find out what some of the barriers may be. Just the standards, the basics to get into the trades will be either a driver's license. You need a driver's license, 18 and older. Some of the trades require an entry exam. So making sure that when individuals do apply, that we can at least have either resources or ways for them to address those three basic requirements to get into the trades. But I think we're definitely gonna get like a big response. And then, like I just said, trying to make sure that we can find solutions for some of those barriers that men and women are going to come in.
That's a great point. So, the communications and the recruitment is really only the first step, because then you have to be prepared to prepare everyone who does get recruited for success.
Yes, and there may even be some individuals who are non-English speaking. So is there going to be, do we actually have programs or something put in place that may be bilingual? Those are things that we know. Some things I think will be prepared, because it feels like a risk assessment that we can identify some of the risks right now, but then as we move forward, we may find things that we would just overlook. But when they do come to the table, we make sure that we have the ability to address those challenges.
My next question is, what do you think are some of the most pertinent overlapping priorities of the green building industry and the work that you're doing? What are some ways that we can bolster each other's efforts or align around different opportunities?
Yeah, and that's like the question that's going to be just going in the future, right? Where I've been in this role for 10 months and I'm still learning a lot more about the construction industry, but I do know one thing about Pittsburgh. We're born and raised in Pittsburgh. Everything in here is old or pre-war construction. So we know that a lot of the buildings definitely need to be maybe reconfigured as far as for the heating, HVAC, electrical systems, and then also going forward in the new buildings and make sure that they're being built with the most greenest technology going forward. Now that the fact that times are changing, the weather is increasing, weather climate's changing, we have to be more considerate of how we build and what impacts it will have on us today, and then even centuries down the road, years to come. So working with GBA, finding out how to address these solutions, and then most importantly, when we do the building, make sure that the buildings are being built, say not for today, but for 20, 30, 40 years down the road and beyond.
I could not agree more. I think, a couple of things that you just made me think of while you were talking is, number one, construction work and a lot of the retrofit work that you're talking about, that's local work. So it has to be done here locally, which leads to local jobs, but also the fact that the construction industry, and particularly the green building industry, is constantly evolving. All of our standards continue to increase in difficulty or in their holistic approach to climate and environment and health. And so as the green building industry continues to evolve, there will always be new skills to learn. And so those are skills that we can train, local folks in and continue to build people's, ability to deliver on green buildings and to do it locally. So I think, that's great. Well, I have a few more questions for you here. So if someone is watching this interview and they are a union contractor, what are some things that they can do to support the work that you're doing?
If they're a union contractor, I would definitely look at, stop and try to not to look at as much as the way you will see it. Look at how a woman or a minority will see the opportunities working in your office. A lot of times you don't do things directly, but you only see the life through your eyes. So a lot of times, you have to kind of look, and then if you're trying to find those men and women that you say that you can't reach, well, you have to at least go where they go. They may not they may not live in your same neighborhood. They may not go to your same place of worship. Or if not, you can always connect, with NBA. There's other organizations out there that you can do outreach for that can actually help you kind of connect the dots of opportunities. And then just make sure that your work environment is open. Sometimes people have like a zero tolerance for safety. That there's a high standard for safety. You can also have that same kind of tolerance for any kind of biases that, you don't allow it to exist. It could be something very subtle where you may have a calendar that you may not think is nothing of it, but it could be offensive to somebody else. So it's like making sure that everything from A to Z is being taken care of. And if something does come up, you nip it in the bud. Sometimes you don't say, well, they're just being them, they're just joking. That's just talking around the water cooler. Like, no, that's not acceptable, because now you're actually allowing that behavior to flourish in that work environment, and it makes it difficult for somebody else. The work is already challenging as it is. And I always say work is easy. Sometimes people just make it hard.
If somebody is watching this interview and they've always wanted to get into the trades, how do you recommend they get started on that journey, or what steps should they take?
Would definitely like to be able to share my contact information with you. But we're in the process of launching a webpage, WPA or WPAbuild.com, and we're also about the .org. But once we have this webpage launched, we'll list all of the 16 trades that you can click on either one of those logos. It will take you directly to that union page. We have the information as far as to when they actually have their enrollment. That will be more of a kind of easy to promote, one-stop shop. Get all the information you need to know about the trades. And we also want to list information about if you need any additional services. As I mentioned before, some do have an exam that you have to take, an assessment exam. And if you haven't done some math or fractions or geometry in years, we always need to brush up. So there's a group we work with called Literacy Pittsburgh, who does have an exam that will actually help you prep for your math part. And then some of the trades will also list some of the test questions on their exam. So it's always good, like I said, that the better you perform on your test, increases your chance of getting into that program.
One thing you and I have discussed is the sort of reinvention of Rosie the Riveter in terms of history repeating itself and how we can look to the past to inform the future. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes, and even when you probably say Rosie the Rivet, some people will say, well, who's Rosie the Rivet? But you can easily do some research, just do a quick Google. So during the Second World War II, there was a shortage in the work industry. There was a lot, of course, not enough workers to work the plants, either in the construction as far as for shipyards, doing the bridges, building tanks, anything that was used for the war efforts. There was a shortage in the industries. So, and I always say history repeats itself. So during the 1940s, when there was a shortage, the US government came up with a campaign called Rosie the Rivet, that there was a lady that they used as kind of a big marketing campaign to attract women to the industry. And I was saying that, once again, in the 40s, there was a shortage. Women and minorities came in and filled that shortfall. And I think right now we're seeing the same thing. So we need a 2022 Rosie Rivet campaign to attract minorities and women into the industry. We don't have the data, as I said, we're trying to work on, but I'm pretty sure that women and minority participation within most of the trades or in the construction industry as a whole is probably single digit. And that's even in any of the 16 trades. If we're looking at construction management, engineering, electrical engineering, architecture, I'm pretty sure that it's probably still very low, maybe 10, but most cases probably single digit participation. So how do we expose young men and women of all ages, either from high school, from elementary, middle school to high school, to individuals up to the 40s on how to get into these industries? And I think a massive campaign is going to probably be what we need to do. I mean, we can do so much here, but you imagine over the years, you've taken away a lot of the tech schools. There was South Road Tech. There was the Energy Innovation Center, the old Connolly trade. And then there was one on Butler Street, which I believe was called Washington. There was a tech school down on Butler Street. Once you take away those public education systems of tech school programs, yeah, men and women come out of high schools who just don't have any interest. And one thing people forget about the trades is that it's free. All of the 16 trades, regardless of which program you go into, once you complete your 3 to 5 years for apprenticeship training, it's zero debt. That's one thing that's been overlooked. The trades pay just as equivalent or even better than some 4-year programs where you can make anywhere starting off at, in your 20s, but when you finish, you can be making up to 80,000. And that's just the very beginning, because we also have a very good org chart of a career path. I would say getting into the trades is like getting into the banking industry as a bank teller. It's just your foot in the door. If you get into the trades, it's just your foot in the door. There's so many career paths in the construction industry, or even, for some of the larger members, you can work for a construction company, but don't mean you have to do construction work. A lot of the companies may have a large staff of 100+ people to run that office. But once again, how can we go into an industry that you don't even know that even exists?
Well, thank you so much, Lance, and good luck in all the work that you're doing.
Well, Leslie, it's always a pleasure. Thank you. I know that, like I said, I'm just looking forward to continue working with GBA, and I'm creating these opportunities and making some changes for our communities.